Chapter 38 Change. I'm just saying, it's too bad we couldn't get a good class together. It's okay. Bree smiled. It works better this way. We had 5 terms left when we started this, and there's only 4 of us, so now we won't have to fight over who gets 2 turns to choose. She was disappointed, though, that we didn't get to take the art class she'd wanted. True, Searchlight said. It was the first orn of our second to last term, and the teacher for this class hadn't shown up yet, so Searchlight and Breeze were chatting quietly while I tried to pretend I wasn't bothered by having a whole classroom of mecha in my helm. The beginning of the term was always rough. We were only 4 classes in and I was definitely ready to be done already. And at least we did get a class together. Ancient civilizations isn't that bad. Breeze frowned. Just kind of useless. No, be positive. Maybe they had some good art back then or something. And boring as pit, Searchlight said. The teacher said there are field trips. Great. More opportunities for Searchlight to get us in trouble. Yeah, just like with geology. Remember that. Kind of a weird coincidence. The 2 most boring classes have the most field trips. Maybe they do that so it's not so boring, Bree said. Or maybe it's just to trick us into thinking it's going to be fun. Ancient civilizations themselves are actually pretty cool. And I like the teacher so far, but like Bree said, I doubt I'll be using that information too much in the future. Bree shook her helm. Well, at least we have the class together. And almost all of us are in this one too. That's lucky. The class we were in now was part of the reason it had been so hard to get a class all together. It was mandatory and took up one of our elective classes. Since Ratchet was younger than us, he couldn't take it yet, but Breeze, Searchlight, and I had managed to end up taking it at the same time with the same teacher. That's something, at least, Searchlight said. The teacher finally came in the door and walked up to the front of the classroom. All right, everyone, he said brightly, then waited for the chatter to die down. Welcome, so glad you could be here. Let's lay down some ground rules and talk about what I'm going to expect from you and how the class is going to work. I know some of you are pretty excited about it. Another term, another batch of mechlings, he talked, explaining basic rules of classroom etiquette, most of which were pretty obvious and universal. They should just get together and write a standard set of rules for every class, so we only had to hear the lecture once. So, the instructor said when he was finished with the speech about classroom rules. As I'm sure all of you know, the purpose of this class is to prepare you all for the upgrade in which you get your alt modes. Unlike the rest of the upgrades, you're going to all get yours at the same time, so it might be a little early for some of you, or a little late. Don't stress about that, it's always fine. As part of that upgrade, you also get some other functions that we'll be learning about and preparing for, such as internal communications, systems, and a greater control of your systems and processor. If you want to opt out of the class, come see me afterward, and I can get you a form for it, but if you opt out, that means it's up to you and your creators to make sure you're prepared when it's time for you to upgrade. Any questions so far? Searchlight raised a hand. Yes. How do you get a flying alt mode? The mech smiled, though on the inside he wasn't too happy. There's one of these every term. Every single term. Well, I really wouldn't suggest that unless you're planning to go into a profession that requires you to fly. But it's our choice, right? Searchlight said. Yes, the teacher said. It's your choice. I'll be talking about how you decide what kind of alt mode is best for you in a different lecture. So your question will be answered in the future, don't worry. I'll talk him out of it. He doesn't look like he ought to be a flyer. He didn't seem too happy about the question, Searchlight frowned. He's going to try to stop me. We'll see about that. This teacher had no idea what he was up against. He did try to talk Searchlight out of it. A few orns later, he spent the whole class talking about frame types and how you had to be careful when picking an alt mode. Technically, you could go as big or as small as you wanted because extra mass could be stored in subspace, but your spark had limitations. Some mecha, especially femmes, had smaller sparks that would have trouble supporting large alt modes. And mecha with larger spark chambers had a hard time fitting them into small vehicle forms. Also, some frames, like the one Seekers had, were built for an easy transformation into a flying vehicle, while others weren't so suited. Searchlight didn't care. He had his spark set on flying. There were plenty of reasons not to. You couldn't have both unless you were a triple changer. Flyers couldn't travel at the same speeds as mecha with ground-based vehicles, and so lots of activities like racing, for example, weren't really possible. Also, there were more laws about where flyers could and couldn't go, and it was significantly more dangerous than ground travel. Searchlight's frame wasn't really right for a flying alt mode. He'd be kind of clumsy in the air, and it would take a while to learn how to fly. For the first little while, it would pretty much be like he didn't have an alt mode at all. But he was determined, and when he was determined about something, there was nothing anyone could say to him to convince him it was a bad idea. So I just decided I'd get a flying alt mode too. The story was a little different for me. My frame was actually well suited for a flying alt mode, and when it came to travel, the last thing I wanted was to risk ever being stuck in traffic. Moving slowly or quickly past large numbers of mecha was not easy on my processor. It was easier to hide it from my friends now that I didn't have my stutter to give me away, but school was getting harder and harder. The idea of flying high above the ground, away from everyone else for chores, that was too appealing. And, well, I couldn't let Searchlight do something so stupid on his own. As the term went on, my processor aches got worse. I could almost always hear the class next door now, and sometimes the ones above and beneath, depending on what floor we were on. Circuitsu was my only respite. Master Yokotron's classroom on the top floor was big. I could still hear the class below us, but during our after-school sessions, there was no one there. I also spent as much time as possible up on the roof, meditating, which helped a lot. I brought Ravage up there. He liked to sit on the railing and look out over the city. And I liked the quiet. I was running out of time and I knew it. I only had 2 more upgrades, and then there wouldn't be processor expansions to look forward to. My friends asked sometimes and I told them I was fine. They didn't really believe me, but they also didn't know how bad it was. Eventually, the time came for us to get our upgrades. Everyone in the class took a decare off of school. This second to last upgrade being the most intense, we needed more time to integrate it. I spent the recovery period at Crescent's house. For the first time in my life, being there was a good thing because it was large and never crowded. It was a respite, and as long as I stayed completely out of her way, she didn't really care that I was there. At the end of the decare, I walked back to school. Our T-cogs were locked down, so we couldn't transform. They didn't want us trying it without supervision. In theory it was pretty simple, but supposedly it could be disorienting the first couple of times. When they woke you up after the upgrade, they let you try scanning the alt mode you'd chosen beforehand, so I had one. Crescent had decided that she didn't want me flying around with a standard alt mode, and had paid for me to have a custom one. I really wasn't sure how to feel about that, though I wasn't surprised. If she was going to care about something, it would be whether Mecha could tell by my alt mode that my caretaker was wealthy. I sat down next to Searchlight in second jure. He was excited to try transforming, but I knew the teacher had other plans for the first orn. Breeze came in and sat by us. We were all a little taller than we'd been before. Hey, Searchlight said. She smiled. I feel all off balance still, she said. Well, you look amazing. Thanks, I guess. Have you tried transforming yet? No, Breeze said. Have you? What do you think? Searchlight shook his helm. But I'm pretty sure the medics locked down our T-cogs, so we can't? They did. Weren't you paying attention? One of these horns, you're going to get yourself hurt trying something like that. I'm totally fine. She sighed. I know. The teacher came in. Good Orn, Everymick, he said, annoyingly cheerful as usual. And Everyvum, Breeze muttered. How are you all doing? Glad to be back in school. Not really. Well, this is an exciting Orn. This Orn, we're going to set up your personal communication systems. Searchlight sighed. Of course, we do the boring stuff first. The teacher handed out datapads. Here, these have instructions to walk you through the process, and each one has a unique code. You should share your code with your friends and your creators. Since you're still not adults yet, please don't put the codes on any public databases, and even when you are an adult, that's not necessarily advisable. He kept talking as he finished, handing us datapads and walked back up to the front of the classroom. Most of us listened as he explained how communications worked. There were two kinds. With external communications, you actually spoke and your comm picked up your voice as well as whatever else you could hear and sent it. Those were more secure and difficult to hack. Internal comms just simulated your voice and sent messages more privately. It was pretty simple. I had a bit of a head start since I had been in the helms of adults when they sent comms. Now, as you know, this building is shielded, so you can't send or receive comms without a password. Since we need you to be able to practice in small groups, after you've got everything set up, I'll give you a temporary password, which will expire at the end of class. Searchlight thought. I think we can get around that password problem, right, Wave? Well, yes, I knew the password. I didn't really want to break the rules without a good reason, though. We all set up our comms and then broke off into groups of 2 or 3 to practice sending internal messages to each other. Breeze got it pretty quickly, and we had to spend most of the rest of the time trying to help Searchlight figure out how to make them work. By my third to last class, I was working up a pretty bad processor ache. So instead of paying attention, I started messing with my pain grid controls. That was a new thing too. You couldn't turn your pain receptors all the way off. They could give you that capability, but they didn't because the ability to completely get rid of pain prompted Mecha to do stupid things and damage themselves. However, adults could turn it down and modify it. It took a while to figure out how it worked, but I managed to get my processor ache under control. I had to keep messing with it throughout the rest of school, though, because the settings drifted back to normal, kind of like how my range drifted back to default. By the time the school warn was over, it was still pretty manageable. I knew this wasn't a permanent solution, but it helped a lot for now. After classes, I got Ravage and went to Searchlight's room. Ratchet had some other students there, working on a project with him, and Breeze wasn't here. I sat in my usual spot at Searchlight's desk and listened to Ratchet and his friends. The 3 of them tended to do class projects together, though they didn't always get along. Especially Ratchet and Wheeljack. Shockwave had to try hard to keep the peace. They had run into a snag in their project idea and were brainstorming ways to get around it. Hey, Wave, do you have the passwords for the communication shield? Searchlight asked. Yep. I pulled out my datapad. You should give those to me, and Breeze and the 3 of us can, like, calm each other during class. I typed a message to him and sent it. If they catch us, Cable or Reach will know how we got the passwords. His datapad pinged. Awesome. He turned it on and read what I'd sent him, then frowned. Come on, he said. No one will ever catch us. You don't really need to calm me, I sent. He looked down and read it, then looked back up. You're as bad as Keepsake, you know that? It's a stupid rule, why can't you at least help me break the stupid rules? Seriously. I turned around and started doing my homework. Searchlight sighed. Sparkless partisan. Go ahead. Withhold information from your own friends so you can keep your teacher's pet status. I messaged him. And you call Ratchet a drama queen. Searchlight laughed. You know I don't mean it, Mech. You're just too noble for the rest of us, Wave. I don't even know where I'd be if I had your abilities. Yeah, I could see that not being a good thing. Then again, growing up with this sort of thing, you learn the limits. And, well, I didn't do anything really bad with my talent, but I didn't do much good with it either. If someone like Searchlight had it instead, he'd probably use it to change the world for the better, not just keep himself and his friends out of trouble and rescue the occasional symbiote. Searchlight started playing with his sensory grid, forcing his optics brighter and darker. This is really crazy, Mech. I just shook my helm and debated whether to get back to my homework or join the conversation Wheeljack, Shockwave, and Ratchet were having. It would be impossible to retrieve the data, Ratchet said. Nothing's impossible, Wheeljack tilted his helm to the side. Maybe if we recalibrate the pulse scanner after every reaction, we'll eventually get lucky and... We'd run out of supplies before that ever happened, Ratchet snapped. I think Ratchet's right, Shockwave said. And it's not logical to rely on something with such a low probability. Maybe. Searchlight was listening to them too. He had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. Even if we could get data from that, there would be no way to analyze it. Ratchet said. We need some method of analysis. Maybe we should do some more research on this, Shockwave said. We're going into it blind. We can't analyze something we have no way of detecting or retrieving data from. There was a lull in the conversation as all 3 considered that suggestion. Searchlight decided to chip in. Couldn't you do like a double-blind analysis or something? They looked at him. Then Ratchet burst out laughing. Wheeljack followed, giggling helplessly. Shockwave just looked down, trying to conceal an amused smile. What? Searchlight said. You, Ratchet gasped. Searchlight, that's a statistical term. This is science we're talking about here. You can't do a double-blind analysis on something non-sentient. Do you even know what double-blind analysis means, or did you just spit it out off the top of your processor? Searchlight said. Wave, help me. I totally know what it means. It's when neither you nor your test subject know whether they're getting the real treatment or just the placebo. Ratchet said. Searchlight raised an optic ridge. Come again. Never mind. Hey, wait, Wheeljack said. Maybe he's right. The project doesn't know what we're doing, and neither do we. Ratchet and Shockwave looked at him. What? You're so funny, Ratchet rolled his optics. Ratchet only laughs if he's making fun of someone, Searchlight said. Don't take it personally. Ratchet glared at Searchlight. Well, if you don't want me to laugh at you, don't say anything stupid. They're kind of mean to each other, Shockwave thought. But they aren't mean to other mecha, just each other. Actually, Ratchet can be kind of insensitive to everyone. Even knowing what it felt like, even after having heard the process numerous times, it took me 3 tries the first time I transformed. We were out in a big wide field. Searchlight and I had one half to ourselves, while the rest of the class had the other. I lay on the ground in my alt mode, tilted sideways, one wing pressing uncomfortably into the rusty gravel. It was a little terrifying, really, to be devoid of limbs and incapable of moving. I couldn't pick myself up off the ground, couldn't turn and look a different direction. I'd heard it could be kind of confusing or frightening the first time. Mecha with claustrophobia sometimes had a difficult time getting used to it, but I hadn't thought that I would. It also wasn't fair that the few who'd managed to transform on the other half of the field could drive, exploring their range of motion. I was on the ground, and if I propelled myself forward, I'd scrape out my wings and then maybe crash into something. If I wanted to be able to move, I would probably need to try again and jump as I transformed, then fly before I hit the ground. I transformed back. Searchlight was still trying to figure it out. I jumped and transformed and tried to fly, but ended up just nose-diving into the ground and flipping over onto my back. I transformed back and got up again. You okay? Searchlight asked. I nodded, feeling kind of embarrassed. I didn't need to wonder whether that had looked ridiculous. I tried a few more times. On the 5th try I managed to fly forward, but had a hard time stopping myself. I transformed back just in time to crash into the wall. Fortunately, this upgrade made us stronger and better able to withstand crashes. You did have to be careful though, especially if you were flying and you didn't want to crash while you were in your alt mode. I got up off the ground and trudged back toward the middle. Searchlight finally managed to transform, but then accidentally changed back before he could figure out how to get his rockets to propel him forward. The other students had mostly figured it out by then and were driving around. It took pretty much the rest of the drawer for me to figure out how to hover, and I crashed a few more times. And despite my head start, Searchlight managed to crash about twice as many times as me. Okay. The teacher said when we had about 8 breams left of class. Everyone back to route mode and let's head to the school again. We'll practice more next dorm. Well, the rest of the class would. Searchlight and Breeze and I had a field trip for our ancient civilizations class. We started walking back toward the school, scraped and dented. Breeze joined us. Are you two okay? Yeah, Searchlight said. But you know how I was all upset that we were going to miss this class next dorm for that field trip. I don't think I'll mind so much. I shook my helm. It could have been worse, though, Searchlight said. At least we both got off the ground a couple of times. We actually hadn't done too badly. The teacher had been impressed, despite himself. Both of us were clumsy, but not nearly as clumsy as he had expected. Even though we couldn't steer yet, and landing was almost always a disaster, we could both hover without tipping over. I was pretty sure we could attribute our unusual amount of control to our training with Mastery Ikatron. We got back to school shortly before the class ended. No one had gotten badly hurt, though there were some dents here and there. The teacher told us to go see Ochre, and so we did. We could have let Ratchet practice, popping out dents, but neither of us really felt like dealing with his anger issues.